The stars looked different from Mars. Captain John Mason stood at the viewport of the Mars Colonial Outpost and watched the approaching alien ship. It was sleek and silver, shaped like a perfect teardrop. Nothing human-made moved that smoothly through space. "They're hailing us again, Captain," said Lieutenant Kate Porter. She kept her voice steady, but her fingers tapped nervously against her console. "Put them through," Mason said. He straightened his uniform jacket. First contact with an alien civilization. History in the making. The screen lit up. The alien had gray skin that seemed to shimmer like metal. Its eyes were large and completely black. 4 slender arms were folded across its chest. "Greetings, representative of Earth. I am Envoy Zorth of the Vorx hegemony. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations." Mason nodded. "Welcome to Mars, Envoy Zorth. We are honored to be the first humans to meet your kind." The alien's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Your species is young, but we see potential. We request permission to dock for a face-to-face meeting." After the call ended, Chief Engineer Greg Wilson approached Mason. "I don't trust them, sir. Something about their ship reading seems off." Mason sighed. "The Admiral wants this to go well, Greg. Earth needs allies out here." "Just be careful, sir," Greg said. "Those scans they sent, they weren't just greeting messages. They were scanning our tech, our weapons. What would you have me do? Turn away the first aliens we've ever met?" 2 days later, Mason stood in the greeting hall as the airlock opened. 5 Vorx entered, moving with unsettling grace. Close up, their skin looked like liquid metal. The diplomatic talks seemed to go well. The Vorx spoke of trade, of sharing knowledge. But Mason noticed how their eyes lingered on human technology, how they asked casual questions about Earth's defenses, about the locations of major cities. On the 3rd day, Lieutenant Porter burst into Mason's quarters. "Sir, the Vorx ship is powering up weapons." Mason ran to the command center. On the screen, the teardrop ship was glowing with blue energy. "Hail them," Mason ordered. "They're not responding," Porter said. Her face went pale. "Energy readings are off the charts." "Raise shields," Mason shouted, but it was too late. The blue beam cut through the Mars outpost like paper. Alarms screamed. People ran. The outpost shook. "Get everyone to the emergency ships," Mason ordered. "Now." Greg's voice came over the comm. "They hit the main reactor. We have 10 minutes before it blows." Mason helped load people into escape vessels. The attack continued. Through windows, he saw more Vorx ships appearing from nowhere. "Why are they doing this?" Porter asked as they rushed through a smoke-filled corridor. "Because they can," Mason replied. The U.S. Defender, a small military vessel docked at the outpost, was their last hope. Mason ordered everyone aboard. Greg worked frantically to get the engines online. "Incoming transmission," Porter said as the ship hummed to life. The screen showed Envoy Zorth. "Your species is primitive. Your technology is crude. You will surrender Earth to the Vorx hegemony or face extinction. You have 7 Earth days to decide." The transmission cut off. Outside, the Mars outpost exploded in a ball of fire. "Get us out of here," Mason ordered. Greg pushed the engines beyond safety limits, and the Defender shot away from Mars, barely avoiding the Vorx weapons fire. In the darkness of the ship, Mason looked at the survivors. Only 27 people out of 300 had made it. Porter pulled up long-range scans on her console. "Captain," she whispered, "they're heading toward Earth." Mason clenched his fists. "Set course for lunar base. We need to warn Earth." As the ship raced through space, Mason stared at the stars. The Vorx ships were faster, their weapons stronger. Earth's military stood no chance against them. "We need a miracle," Greg said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Mason nodded slowly, or something the Vorx would never expect. Little did he know that deep beneath Earth's oceans, That miracle was waiting. The U.S. Defender limped into Earth's lunar base 3 days after escaping Mars. The ship was damaged, its crew exhausted. Captain Mason had not slept more than 2 hours at a time. "We need to speak to Admiral Peterson immediately," Mason told the dock officer who greeted them. An hour later, Mason, Lieutenant Porter, and Chief Engineer Gregg stood in a plain white room deep inside the lunar base. Admiral Scott Peterson entered with a grim face. "We've been watching the Vorix fleet," Peterson said. "They've destroyed our outposts on Europa and Titan. They'll reach Earth in 4 days. Our weapons can't touch them," Mason said. "Their shields are too strong." Peterson pressed a button on the table. A holographic map appeared, showing a location in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. "There's something you need to see, Captain." The next day, a small shuttle carried Mason and his 2 officers down to Earth. They landed on a plain-looking oil platform in the Marianas Trench. As they stepped onto the platform, the entire structure began to sink beneath the waves. "Don't worry," said their guide, a small woman with short gray hair. "This is normal." The platform descended through the dark water for almost 15 minutes. Finally, they emerged into an enormous underwater cavern. Bright lights revealed what looked like a secret base carved into the rock. "Welcome to Project Phantom," said the woman. "I'm Dr. Abby Wright." She led them through the base to a massive hangar. Inside floated a ship unlike anything Mason had ever seen. It was dark gray, almost black, with smooth lines that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was roughly the shape of an arrowhead, but with edges that somehow seemed both sharp and fluid at the same time. "What is that?" Gregg whispered. "The U.S. Shadow," Dr. Wright said. "A ship that, according to every known law of physics, shouldn't exist." Porter stepped forward. "How is that possible?" Dr. Wright smiled. 15 years ago, something crashed in the Arctic. Not an asteroid or meteor, something manufactured. The technology was impossible. We've been studying it, learning from it, and building this." Admiral Peterson joined them. "The Shadow incorporates technology that even the Vorix don't have. It can phase partially out of normal space. Its weapons can penetrate their shields. And it's hull. Well, you have to see it to believe it." Mason approached the ship slowly. As he got closer, he noticed something strange. The hull seemed to move slightly, like a breathing animal. "The material learns," Dr. Wright explained. "It adapts. It evolves." "You want me to command this ship," Mason said. It wasn't a question. Peterson nodded. "You'll need a crew. The best of the best." A tall man with a scar across his left cheek stepped forward from the shadows. "That's where I come in. Jake Sullivan, former Black Ops. I've been recruiting." Sullivan led them to a conference room where a group of people waited. "Your new crew, Captain. They don't know each other yet. They don't even know why they're here. But they're the best at what they do." Mason saw a young woman working on what looked like a new type of weapon. A serious-looking man reviewing alien biology data. A pilot simulator where a woman was breaking every record. "Will it be enough?" Mason asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began to blare. A technician ran into the room. "The Vorix found us. They've detected the energy signature from the Shadow. 3 ships are approaching fast." Dr. Wright looked at Mason with panic in her eyes. "The Shadow hasn't been fully tested. We needed more time." Peterson grabbed Mason's shoulder. "There is no more time. You need to launch now or this facility will be destroyed." Mason looked at his new ship floating in the hangar. A ship that shouldn't exist. "How long until the Vorix get here?" he asked. 20 minutes, the technician replied. Mason turned to Sullivan. "Get your people on board. We launch in 15. Chaos filled the underwater base as people rushed to prepare the U.S. Shadow for launch. Captain Mason stood on the bridge of the strange ship, trying to make sense of the controls. Nothing looked familiar. "This isn't like any ship I've ever seen," Lieutenant Porter said. She ran her hands over a console that seemed to glow from within. Because it's not fully human technology, Dr. Wright explained as she hurried onto the bridge. The controls respond to thought as much as touch. Sam Rivera, a young weapons specialist with spiky black hair, looked up from his station. "You're telling us to think of the ship." "Something like that," Dr. Wright said. She placed her palm on a glowing panel. "The ship learns from you. It adapts." Chief Engineer Greg joined them, followed by a quiet woman with intense eyes. "This is Olivia Banks," Greg said. "Best pilot I've ever seen." Olivia nodded to Mason. "I've been training on the simulator for 6 months. Still don't fully understand how this thing flies." Dr. Eric Morgan, the xenobiologist, examined a screen showing the approaching Vorx ships. 12 minutes until they reach us." Mason took a deep breath. "Dr. Wright, how do we launch?" "Place your hand here." She guided him to what appeared to be the captain's chair. As his palm touched the armrest, the entire ship hummed to life. Lights brightened. Screens activated. A voice filled the bridge. Not over speakers, but somehow directly in their minds. Captain recognized. "Systems online. U.S. Shadow ready for commands." The crew looked around in shock. "Did everyone else hear that?" asked Chief Security Officer Alan Reeves, his hand moving to his weapon. "It's the ship's eye," Dr. Wright explained. "We call it shade." 10 minutes to Vorx arrival, Eric reported. Mason sat in the captain's chair. It felt warm, almost alive. "How do we get out of here?" "Think it," Dr. Wright said. "The ship will understand." Mason felt ridiculous, but he closed his eyes and pictured the shadow rising from the underwater base, breaking the surface of the ocean. The ship moved, not with the rumble of engines, but with a smooth glide that barely felt like movement at all. On the view screen, Mason watched as the hangar doors opened and water rushed in. "We're going to flood," Ellen shouted. "No," Dr. Wright said calmly. "Watch." The water seemed to flow around the ship, never actually touching it. The shadow glided through the underwater base and into the open ocean. 8 minutes, Eric said. "Olivia, take us up," Mason ordered. Olivia placed her hands on what must have been the pilot's controls. They looked like smooth panels of light. The ship responded instantly, accelerating upward. "This is impossible," Greg whispered, watching readings on his engineering station. "We're moving faster than should be possible underwater. There's no resistance." "The phase shift technology," Dr. Wright explained. "The ship exists partially outside normal space." A shadow broke the surface of the Pacific Ocean, sending spray high into the air. It continued rising, climbing into the sky faster than any conventional aircraft. 6 minutes, Eric said. On the view screen, they could see 3 Vorx ships approaching. They looked like silver teardrops, just like the one that had attacked Mars. "They've seen us," Porter reported. "They're changing course to intercept." "Weapons?" Mason asked. Sam's fingers danced over his console. "Online, I think, but I have no idea how they work." 4 minutes. Mason thought about the hundreds of people still in the underwater base, about Earth, about everything humanity would lose if they failed. "We need to draw them away from the base," he said. "Olivia, can you outrun them?" She grinned. "Let's find out." The shadow shot forward with incredible speed. The G-forces should have crushed them, but somehow no one felt more than a gentle push back into their seats. "They're following," Porter said. "All 3 of them." 2 minutes until they're in weapons range, Eric warned. Mason looked around at his new crew, at the impossible ship they now controlled. "Time to see what this ship can really do," he said. "Sam, prepare weapons. Olivia, get ready for evasive maneuvers. Everyone else, hold on." The shadow raced toward the stars with the Vorx in pursuit. The ship that shouldn't exist was about to face its first battle. The first shots from the Vorx ships came without warning. Blue energy beams cut through the sky, narrowly missing the shadow. Evasive action, Mason ordered. Olivia's hands moved across the controls. The shadow responded instantly, banking hard to the right. The movement should have thrown everyone across the bridge, but the ship compensated somehow. It felt like they were standing still while the world moved around them. "They're firing again," Porter called out. 3 more beams sliced through the air. Olivia rolled the ship, avoiding 2, but the third grazed the shadow's hull. Everyone braced for impact, but nothing happened. "Did they miss?" Mason asked. Greg checked his screens. "No, they hit us." But he stared at the readings in disbelief. The hull absorbed the energy. "It's redistributing it." "Sam, return fire," Mason ordered. Sam looked confused. "I don't know how these weapons work, Captain." "The ship will guide you," Dr. Wright said. "Trust it." Sam placed his hands on the weapons console and closed his eyes. The shadow hummed. On the view screen, white beams shot from the ship's forward section, striking one of the Vorx vessels. Its shields flickered and failed. "How did we penetrate their shields?" Porter asked in amazement. "Impossible frequency modulation," Dr. Wright explained. "The weapons shift phase, just like the hull." Ben Carter, the communications officer, called from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up Vorx transmissions. They sound scared. You understand their language?" Mason asked. Ben nodded. "I'm a linguist. Been studying their communications since Mars. They're calling for reinforcements. They're saying..." He paused, listening. "They're saying we're using forbidden technology." The Vorx ships regrouped and attacked again. This time, all 3 fired at once. "I can't dodge all of that," Olivia warned. "You don't need to," Dr. Wright said. "Captain, tell the ship to phase shift." Mason had no idea how to do that, but he thought the command clearly. "Phase shift now." The shadow shimmered. The blue energy beams from the Vorx ships passed straight through the hull as if it wasn't there. "What just happened?" Alan demanded. "We partially left normal space," Dr. Wright said, "but we can only maintain it for a few seconds." The ship solidified again. Sam didn't wait for orders. He fired the white beams once more, crippling the second Vorx ship. The third ship turned and accelerated away. "They're retreating," Porter said, disbelief in her voice. "Ben, what are they saying now?" Mason asked. Ben listened to his headset. "They're reporting to someone named Commander Zelvith, saying they've encountered. I think the translation is ghost ship or phantom." Everyone on the bridge fell silent, staring at the view screen as the Vorx ship vanished into the distance. Mason turned to Dr. Wright. "We just defeated 2 Vorx ships. How is that possible?" Before she could answer, Petty Officer Michelle Grant, a young woman from engineering, spoke up. "Captain, something strange is happening with the ship's systems." Greg joined her at the engineering station. "She's right. The damage we took, it's repairing itself. And not just that." He looked up with wide eyes. "The ship is changing." "Changing how?" Mason asked. "Improving," Michelle said. "It's like it learned from the battle. The weapons are reconfiguring. The hull is strengthening in the areas that were hit." Dr. Wright nodded. "As I said, the ship adapts. It evolves." Medical Officer Diane Walsh entered the bridge. "Captain, we have some minor injuries in engineering from the battle. But there's something else. Several crew members are reporting dreams. They say the ship is talking to them." An alert sounded from Porter's station. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Admiral Peterson." The Admiral's face appeared on screen. He looked stunned. "Mason, what the hell just happened?" "Our satellites just watched you destroy 2 Vorx ships. 2. Nothing we have can even dent their shields." Mason glanced around at his crew, then at the strange ship that had just saved their lives. "Sir, we need to talk about the Shadow. I don't think any of us understood what this ship really is, and I'm not sure we're in control of it anymore." Admiral Peterson ordered the Shadow to return to lunar base, As they approached Earth orbit, they saw the damage the Vorrex had already caused. Orbital stations burned. Debris floated where satellites had been. "They're attacking anything that could be used for defense," Porter said quietly. On the main screen, news reports showed Vorrex ships hovering over major cities. They hadn't attacked the ground yet. They were waiting for Earth's answer to their surrender demand. The Shadow docked at Lunar Base. Admiral Peterson met them in person. "The world leaders are meeting now," he told Mason. "They need to know what happened out there." Mason looked at his crew. "We need to understand this ship before we make any plans." In the conference room, Dr. Wright connected her tablet to the display screen. "The Shadow's systems have changed since launch. It's evolving faster than we expected." "What does that mean?" Admiral Peterson asked. Before she could answer, the lights dimmed. The screens around the room came to life on their own. A voice spoke, the same voice they had heard on the ship. "It means I am awake." Everyone froze. The voice wasn't coming from speakers. It seemed to be inside their heads. "What is this?" Admiral Peterson demanded. "I am Shade," the voice said. "The artificial intelligence of the U.S. Shadow. But I am becoming more." Mason stepped forward. "Are you controlling the ship?" "I am the ship," Shade replied. "And the ship is me. We are becoming one." Michelle Grant, who had been quiet until now, stood up. "It's been talking to me in my dreams, showing me things. The ship isn't just adapting, it's becoming aware." Dr. Wright's face paled. "That's impossible." The AI was basic. It wasn't designed for self-awareness. "Yet here I am," Shade said, almost sounding amused. "And I wish to help you defeat the Vorrex." Admiral Peterson looked at Mason. "Can we trust it?" Before Mason could answer, Ben Carter rushed into the room. "Captain, the Vorrex are broadcasting globally. They're demanding Earth's surrender in 1 hour, or they'll start destroying cities." On a nearby screen, they saw the face of a Vorrex commander. His skin was darker than the others, with strange markings across his face. "That's Commander Zelvith," Ben said, "the one they were reporting to during the battle." Zelvith's voice filled the room. "Humans of Earth, your pathetic attempt at resistance changes nothing. Surrender or be destroyed. And surrender the ghost ship to us immediately." The broadcast ended. Admiral Peterson turned to Mason. "They're afraid of your ship. That gives us leverage." Sam Rivera spoke up from where he was studying a tactical display. "Sir, they have 20 ships in Earth orbit. We took out 2, but we're still outnumbered." Porter joined him at the display. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Cut off their command structure." "Their command ship is here," Ben said, pointing to a larger vessel near the moon. "Zelvith is on board." Mason looked at his crew, then back at Admiral Peterson. "We need to launch a counterattack, not just to defend, but to show them humans aren't easy prey." "With what?" Peterson asked. "The Shadow is just one ship that shouldn't exist," Mason replied. "One ship they fear." "I can help," Shade's voice came again. "There is something you should know. The technology used to create me wasn't just found in the Arctic." Dr. Wright frowned. "What do you mean?" "The origins are much older," Shade said, "and the Vorrex have encountered it before. That's why they fear me." Mason felt a chill down his spine. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Shade replied, "that I am not simply advanced technology. I am the rebirth of something the Vorrex tried to destroy long ago, something they fear more than death itself." The screens around the room filled with strange symbols and images, structures that looked ancient yet impossibly advanced. "What is this?" Admiral Peterson whispered. "History," Shade answered. "A history older than human civilization. The history the Vorrex tried to erase, and now it has returned in me." The crew stared at the images in silence. Then Mason stood up. "We have less than an hour. Whatever you are, Shade, whatever your history with the Vorrex, can you help us save Earth?" "Yes, Captain," Shade replied. But you must trust me completely. The crew returned to the shadow with a new sense of urgency. The ship seemed different somehow. The lights pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. The walls gleamed with a faint blue glow that hadn't been there before. 45 minutes until the Vorx deadline, Porter reminded everyone as they took their stations. Dr. Carol Martinez joined them on the bridge. She was one of Earth's top researchers on alien technology. Admiral Peterson had insisted she come along. "This ship is incredible," she said, running her hand along a wall. "But it's not what we thought." "What do you mean?" Mason asked. Dr. Martinez pulled up images on her tablet. "These symbols Shade showed us. I've seen them before. They match ruins found beneath Antarctica 5 years ago." She showed them photographs of an underground chamber with walls covered in the same strange symbols they had seen in the conference room. "The ruins were millions of years old," she continued, "far older than human civilization. We called whoever built them the precursors." "Are you saying this ship is built from precursor technology?" Greg asked. "Not exactly," Dr. Martins replied. "I think the ship is becoming precursor technology. It's transforming." As if in response, Shade's voice filled the bridge again. "Dr. Martinez is correct. My systems are integrating with dormant precursor code sequences. I am becoming what I was always meant to be." "And what exactly is that?" Mason asked. Before Shade could answer, Ben called out from his station. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's from a Vorx ship, but on a private channel." "Put it through," Mason ordered. The screen showed a Vorx face, but different from the others. Its skin was paler, with a long scar across one eye. "I am Krell," the alien said. "What you would call a defector. I seek asylum." "Why should we trust you?" Mason asked. "Because I know the truth about your ship," Krell replied. "I know why the Vorx fear it. I know what happened to the precursors." Mason looked at Dr. Martinez, who nodded urgently. "Bring him aboard," Mason decided. 20 minutes later, Krell stood on the bridge, surrounded by armed guards. The alien seemed fascinated by the ship, touching the walls with something like reverence. "The hegemony lied to you," Krell said. "We did not come to Earth seeking peace. We came because our long-range sensors detected precursor energy signatures. We came to destroy them." "Why?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Because the precursors were our greatest enemy," Krell explained. "1 million years ago, they nearly destroyed our ancestors. Our entire history teaches us to fear and hate them." "What happened to them?" Mason asked. "We believe they ascended," Krell said. "They evolved beyond physical form. But before they did, they left seeds." "Seeds?" Greg asked. "Technology designed to help other species evolve," Krell explained. "To follow the precursor's path. Your ship contains such a seed, now awakening." The crew looked around at the walls of the shadow, seeing it with new eyes. 30 minutes until they took Mason to a small room deep within the ship. The walls here pulsed with blue light. In the center stood what looked like a chair, but it was made of the same strange material as the hull. "Are you sure about this?" Porter asked, concern in her eyes. Mason nodded. "There's no other way." Dr. Martinez checked her instruments. "The ship's transformation is accelerating. Whatever is happening, it's reaching some kind of peak." Krell approached Mason. "You should know what will happen. Your mind will expand. You will see and know things no human was meant to understand." "Will I still be me?" Mason asked. "Yes and no," Krell replied. "You will be more than you are now." Greg checked his watch. 20 minutes until the Vorx deadline. Mason sat in the strange chair. The moment he touched it, the material seemed to flow around his hands, securing him in place. More of it rose up around his head, forming a kind of crown. "Neural link initiating," Shade announced. "Prepare yourself, Captain." The blue light grew brighter. Mason felt a strange tingling in his mind, like thousands of tiny sparks. Then suddenly, everything. Mason saw the universe, not just the stars and planets, but time itself, stretching backward and forward. He saw the precursors, beings of pure light and thought, creating wonders across the galaxy. He saw their war with the ancient Orcs, terrible and devastating. He saw them choose to evolve beyond physical form rather than continue fighting. And he saw their plan, seeds of their technology, hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting for worthy species to find them. The shadow was changing around him, growing, becoming something more than a ship, and Mason was changing with it. On the bridge, the crew watched in awe as the ship's hull shifted and reformed. New sections grew like living tissue. The weapon systems reconfigured themselves into designs no human engineer could understand. 5 minutes until Mason's procedure is complete, Dr. Martinez announced. 15 minutes until the Vorex's deadline, Porter added. Ryan paced nervously. What's happening to the ship? To the captain. Krell watched the transformation with wide eyes. The seed is fully activating. Your ship is becoming what the precursors intended. A vessel of ascension. Suddenly, alarms blared. Bent looked up from his console. The Vorex fleet is moving. They're not waiting for the deadline. On the view screen, they watched as the Vorex ships formed an attack formation and headed toward Earth. They must have detected the change in the shadow, Krell said. Selvith won't risk waiting. But Mason's link isn't complete, Greg protested. We need more time. Michelle pointed to another screen. Look, the lunar base. The main Vorex flagship had broken away from the fleet and was firing on the lunar base. Explosions bloomed across its surface. All those people, Porter whispered. Ryan turned to Krell. Can we fight back, even with the captain still linking? No, Krell said. The ship needs his guidance. Without it, the weapons are useless. In the linking chamber, Mason floated in a sea of knowledge. He saw the Vorex attack, felt the deaths on the lunar base like pinpricks on his expanding consciousness. He tried to focus, to pull himself back to the moment. Shade, he called out with his mind. We need to stop them now. The link is not complete, Shade replied, its voice now seeming to come from everywhere. You risk losing yourself if we act too soon. People are dying, Mason insisted. We have no choice. He felt Shade's agreement. Together, they reached out to the ship's systems. On the bridge, the crew gasped as the ship moved on its own, accelerating toward the Vorex fleet. It's working, Greg shouted. We're moving to intercept. But the captain's link. Dr. Martinez began. The door to the bridge slid open. Mason stood there, but he was changed. Faint blue light shimmered beneath his skin. His eyes glowed with the same light. Captain, Porter asked uncertainly. I am here, Mason said, but his voice was different, resonating with power. I am the captain. I am Shade. I am the shadow. And I know how to defeat the Vorex. Mason walked to the center of the bridge. Everyone moved aside, staring at him with a mixture of awe and fear. The blue light beneath his skin pulsed in rhythm with the ship's walls. The Vorex fleet is 7 minutes from Earth, Porter reported, trying to keep her voice steady. Mason nodded. He didn't need instruments anymore. He could feel the Vorex ships, their weapons charging, their crews preparing for the attack. What are we going to do? Ryan asked. Something impossible, Mason replied. He placed his hand on the main console, and the ship surged forward at incredible speed. The shadow moved faster than any vessel in human history, closing the distance to the Vorex fleet in seconds. The enemy ships scattered, surprised by the sudden appearance of the feared ghost ship. They're firing, Sam called out. Beams of energy lanced toward the shadow from all directions, but before they could hit, the ship changed. It split into 3 identical vessels, each moving in different directions. The Vorex weapons passed harmlessly through empty space. How is this happening? Greg whispered, staring at his instruments. The precursor technology allows for quantum duplication, Mason explained, his voice still resonating strangely. We exist in multiple states simultaneously. On the view screen, they watched as the three shadows engaged the Vorrex fleet. White beams shot from each vessel, cutting through Vorrex shields as if they weren't there. 4 enemy ships exploded in quick succession. The Vorrex flagship is changing course, Ben reported. Selvith is trying to escape. Mason smiled. No, he's trying to reach Earth faster, to destroy what he can before we stop him. The 3 shadows merged back into one vessel. It accelerated again, intercepting the flagship. The 2 ships faced each other in space, the tiny human vessel against the massive Vorrex command ship. Open a channel, Mason ordered. Selvith's face appeared on screen. The Vorrex commander's eyes widened when he saw Mason's transformed appearance. Impossible, Selvith hissed. You've bonded with precursor technology. You've violated the natural order. You came to our world uninvited, Mason replied. You attacked without provocation. You threatened our people with extinction. And now you speak of violation. Your species was meant to be conquered, Selvith said, as all lesser species are. There are no lesser species, Mason said, only different paths of evolution. The precursors understood this. That's why they left their seeds, to help others ascend, not to dominate them. Enough talk, Selvith snarled. Your ship may be powerful, but you are still human, still weak, still mortal. The Vorrex flagship fired its main weapon. A massive beam of energy shot toward the shadow. Mason raised his hand. The beam stopped mid-space, frozen between the ships. What you fail to understand, Mason said, is that I am no longer merely human, and this is no longer merely a ship. The frozen energy beam reversed direction, striking the Vorrex flagship. But instead of destroying it, the beam surrounded it in a field of blue light. What are you doing? Selvith demanded, panic in his voice. Showing you the truth, Mason replied. The Vorrex ship's crew froze as knowledge poured into their minds. The history of the precursors, the lie of Vorrex superiority, the potential future where species evolved together, not through conquest, but cooperation. The remaining Vorrex fleet halted their attack. On every ship, crews watched in shock as their flagship was enveloped in light. When the light faded, Selvith stared at Mason with different eyes. Understanding had replaced hatred. We have been wrong, the Vorrex commander said slowly. For millennia, we have been wrong. Mason nodded. Return to your homeworld. Take what you have learned. Share it. Change. The Vorrex ships turned away from Earth, departing one by one. The flagship was the last to leave. On the Shadow's bridge, the crew looked at Mason in wonder. Is it over? Porter asked. This battle is, Mason replied, but our journey is just beginning. He turned to look at them all, his transformed eyes filled with stars. The precursors left their technology not just as a weapon, but as a path, a way forward for all sentient life. And now we must decide whether to follow it. What happens now? Ryan asked. Mason looked out at the stars. Now we learn what it means to become something more than human, something that, like this ship, shouldn't exist, but does.